Healing often makes people soft. Now, I don't mean that to throw shade, but much rather to highlight softness without standards leads to tolerance. And that tolerance can lead to accepting things that aren't really for you, hurt you, and make things much more difficult than they should be. Rebuilding your standards after healing is a paramount step in getting better, in identifying and becoming this person who no longer comes from their past but is stepping into this bright future. We're talking about self-respect and not harshness. Hello there and welcome. My name is Kanchefu, and here we talk about personal development. In particular, we talk about life after therapy. If you're new here, press subscribe, but if not, let us begin. Now let's talk a bit more about that. What are those standards that can drift from post-therapy? And what I mean by that is, after therapy, there's a newfound self. You now understand yourself on a deeper level, in a place that you're much more vulnerable, in having given that voice to the part of you that was neglected, that was suppressed, that couldn't speak. So you become more understanding and accommodating, but that could lead to negatively exploiting yourself. Because you're more empathetic and you're more reasoning, that empathy can lead to lowering your boundary and negating your own self-worth. You know, it's almost as if tolerance replaces discernment. What is really for you and what isn't. What you need within your life and what you don't. Instead of accepting anything and everything, you end up tolerating how things just are. One powerful example is avoidance of conflict, leading to over-acceptance. You know, it's very easy to slip into that because of this newfound place you're in. But we're here to recognize that. Because I don't want your self-prioritization, you doing things for yourself first, to decrease. Because then you're living for others. You're doing things for others, you're not supporting yourself anymore. So we have to build these standards that are already in place, but on a lower level. Let's call it a standard ladder. Let's look at the first level. Level 1 is all about awareness. What you are aware is happening in your life. As much as now you're aware of what has happened before, the things that and the experiences and events that have taken place that have led to you being here today. Let's recognize what patterns are being tolerated. Things are you letting fly off the shelf? What things are you giving excuses for? What things aren't such a big deal because that's just how it is? Because I want you to identify the patterns of over-acceptance and notice when those standards have dropped. Level 2 is definition. Let's clearly define when and where it happens, because then we're able to define what is acceptable and what isn't. You know, once we have a clear marker, this isn't acceptable for my life and this is, you can make this boundary. And really, we're able to establish some non-negotiables. Level 3 is enforcement. Once we have raised our awareness and we define those behaviors, we can enforce what boundaries we want for ourselves. Whether that's a certain amount of time in a certain area, a type of communication. What we're trying to identify is, in what environment, in what circumstances do your standards drop and over-acceptance happens? And then we can enforce, okay, here I do this, here I do that. Here I don't do this, here I don't do that. But make that applicable to your life. Because what I'm encouraging is the removal of tolerances when breaches against you are constantly being repeated. And then lastly, level 4 is embodiment. Acting and thinking in a new way. It doesn't come naturally at first. But what we're looking for is to align your behaviors, the things you do, say, think, and act, with these standards consistently. Reminding yourself of who you are. Encouraging yourself of this is for you and not against you, and continue working on momentum moving forward. This takes maintaining those standards without emotional negotiation and reinforcing identity through your action. You know what this makes me think about is someone who's just finished therapy. Let's give an example of their relationship. They can be understanding, but they can be over accepting, allowing comments, whether positive or negative, and actions being swept under the carpet, and that can lead to avoiding those issues. So what happens as a byproduct of that is tolerating behaviors that conflict with their values, their beliefs. But the person we're working on becoming is, through raising and working on that standard that is already there, you're able to recognize the misalignments quickly. It might take a bit of realization through some reflection, but it's there. And then communicate clearly to said counterpart, to in said environment, then act in accordance with your standards. So I have a challenge for you. I want you to identify one area over tolerance that you have, and I want you to define one clear standard within that area, aka something you would do or would not do. But after that, communicate that standard directly to environment, to person, to that thing, and take action if that standard is not repeated. But not just once. Stay consistent with it without any justification. This is building character. This is developing you beyond you learning from your past, but stepping into what's next for yourself. It builds courage, it builds confidence, it builds you. personal development. And that's where I'm going to leave it today. If you enjoyed today's discussion, make sure you press subscribe, and also make sure to share this video with a friend or family member you know has recently finished therapy and you think this video will support them. I've got one more question to ask before we end. Where do you tolerate too much? If you'd like support with the standards ladder, make sure to comment the word rebuild. My name is Kanchefu once more. Have a good day, morning, night or evening for wherever you're in the world watching this, and I'll see you next week for our next discussion.